So I don't know about you guys, but sometimes I'll watch some of these films and I'm blown away by the color grades and just the way the overall frame looks. And I get obsessed with trying to make my films or anything that I shoot as close to that as possible. And I'm not gonna lie to you guys, I get super frustrated trying to do this. I cannot stand that, that really clean digital image that we get out of some of these, lower end DSLRs, or even if it's a lower end cinema camera. But of course, it's not like we're gonna switch to a real film camera to try to achieve, those little subtleties and those little details that really bring out the character of a film that you're watching. But the question is, how do we actually get that look? So Dehancer reached out to me a few months ago and they asked me if I wanted to try their plugin. And for those of you who don't know what Dehancer is a film emulation plugin that has the ability to turn your digital looking footage into something that looks more like film. And to be completely honest with you guys, when I saw the email, I read it, I saw the plugin, I didn't really think too much of it. And I let months go by without even opening up the plugin. Fast forward to a project that I wanted to shoot and kind of give a more film, grittier, dirtier vibe to. I was, going through my color grading and I came up with a finished product and I was like, it's just not exactly what I wanted. And then I thought to myself, you know what? Let me just pop open this Dehancer plugin and let me just see what it's about. And I quickly realized how powerful of a tool that is. Now, before you guys go and think that this is some shameless sponsor ad, it is not. Dehancer did not pay me $1 for this. They didn't even ask me for a real review. They just wanted me to tell them how their product looked and felt. And the only thing they said is that if you do review this, we'll give you the product for free. So no, this is not sponsored. Now, with that out of the way, I want to dive into this plugin and show you guys exactly what you can do with it, how you can use it. I'm going to do a color grade with Dehancer and one without Dehancer, and you guys be the judge. You guys let me know what you think. I'll leave a discount code down below. You guys can use that code. This is my real, true, honest review. So let's jump right in. Okay, so the shot that we're going to take is this one right here. So when you add Dehancer to your clip, this is pretty much what you get. Let's go down some of these and show you guys how I grade this clip. Now, the first thing that I do is I go to input and I choose my source. And what I like to do is I like to go to choose camera. Now, what's really cool about Dehancer is that it has the ability to go through almost any camera that you could possibly shoot on. You can even choose an Apple iPhone, which is pretty cool. But I'm gonna go down to Blackmagic Pocket 6K. This takes it from like log to 709. What's cool about this is that you could use this to adjust exposure, just in case you didn't nail exposure correctly. You can go here and shift the temperature to something, warmer or colder. Shift the tint, go a little bit more magenta, a little bit more green. I'm gonna leave that right there. And then you can mess with defringe and defringe radius. I'm gonna just leave this. Let's go to 0.1. I think that's about right. I'm gonna not mess with the temperature and I'm not gonna mess with the tint. Now, the next aspect that you can start to edit is something called film. Now, this is where Dehancer gets pretty cool. You can go through all these different film stocks and they have everything from, Fuji to Kodak to Polaroid, all these different film stocks. And each one of these film stocks gives you a pretty distinctively different look, which is really cool. Now, I suggest going through here and just checking out the different film stocks, but one that I like was the Kodak Ektar 100. For me, in this particular scene, this just gave me the kind of look that I was going for. Now, once you choose your film stock, you can mess with the push and pull. And basically what the push and pull is just, it warms it up or it cools it down a little bit. And for this, I'm going to set it to something around 1.4. To me, that looks pretty good. Then the next thing that I'm going to go through is I'm going to go to print. And the print really is like almost choosing a LUT. When you go to the print profile, you can choose linear, Cineon, film log, Fujifilm, Kodak 2383. But one that I just thought looked good on this was the glossy paper. Without this print, it's essentially just like in a Rec 709 format. This print really takes it to that place where you're really starting to mess with the final details and have a final look. With this, you can mess around with, exposure. You can mess around with the target white. But something that's cool that's on here is something called color density. And color density is exactly what it sounds like. If you start to up the color density, what that does is it starts making the colors a little bit more deeper, a little bit more richer. And when we see films, we tend to think that they're super saturated, but the fact is that films aren't necessarily like oversaturated. They're just really deep and dense in color. So in terms of color density, I'm just going to leave this to a 50. Now, because I put the color density up a lot, I'm going to go ahead and just bring down the saturation just a little bit. You don't want it to feel oversaturated or too hot. The next section that I'm going to jump to is the film compression section. Now, what film compression does is really control the highlights and the blacks in your image, and it kind of compresses them so it almost like rounds it out and it makes it not so harsh. When you look at a frame from a film and you look at the histogram, nothing is ever at 100 and nothing is ever at 0. It kind of hangs around the middle, and there's a nice gentle roll off from the highs and the lows. Nothing like super overly contrasty. Now, if I take it off, this is what it looks like, and when I put it on, this is what it looks like. And the biggest tell that you can get is really in the highlights. If you notice the highlights right here, they're pretty noticeable. But when I click this, it dulls them down. Now, you can mess with the white point. You can put them down to about 50, or you could kind of bring them up and have them a little bit more subtle. That's really what's cool about this, is you can make the contrast a little bit more subtle of a contrast, which is nice, especially for like roll off on shadows on the face. So I'm not gonna overdo this too much. I'm gonna bring the white point to about 88. I think that looks pretty good. Now for the tonal range, I'm gonna leave it down to about 17, because to me that looks pretty good. I don't want it to affect all of the highlights. I just want it to affect a bit of it. And then we have color density again, and I'm just gonna bring that up to 100. I want it to be pretty dense. A really cool feature that I had a lot of fun playing with was this color head. What's cool about the color head is that it acts a lot like the color wheels, only it's a much more simplified version. And to me, I don't know why, it really helped me kind of dial in exactly the kind of look that I was going for. So you could really mess with the yellow and the blue. You could either push it either green or magenta, and then, you know, the cyan and red. You could even get a little bit more detailed with the shadow tone, the midtones, and the highlights. So right now, I'm just gonna play with this and show you guys how I graded this. A lot of the highlights in this particular scene are warm. So I want to take that and shift it a little bit more towards yellow. And then a lot of this goes into like color theory, but the opposite of yellow obviously is blue. When we're talking about shifting the shadows, I wanted kind of like a more cyan look. So I'm gonna shift this a little bit more towards cyan instead of red, so I could cool it down just a little bit, and that to me looks pretty good. And because I want that nice contrast between the warmer yellow tones, I want to go towards a little bit more cyan, and especially in the shadows. I'm going to push the shadows a little bit cooler. So I'm going to go down to like let's do like -15. And then the highlights, I'm going to go a little bit warmer on the highlights. Let's do like a +10. So to me, this image is already looking pretty good. Next, we have film grain. This is really where Dehancer shines, because, you know, there's so many different overlays and so many different plugins that kind of just look like it's film grain over your footage. But somehow, some way, and I don't know the science on this, but they have found a way to work it into the footage so it doesn't just feel like it's overlapping and laid on top of the footage. It feels like it's really ingrained in the footage. Now with the film grain, I really don't like to do too much with it. And what's really cool about this is that when you enable it, you can go to custom film grain. And if I really go to like 100% here, you could start to really see the film grain, especially in like this area. So if I want to take the size and I want to put it up to like 48, look how big that gets. And then you could put it down in size and really have it nice and small. To me, I don't really like to have it past like 12 or 13. So I'm going to go to like, you know, something around the level of like 11. Now the amount, you could shift the amount up and down. Again, I think that you have to be kind of delicate with this, because you could easily start to overdo it. I just like to have something between like 20 and 50. So I'm going to go for like 34, 35-ish, something around there. Now the resolution, remember that this plugin is called Dehancer. It's not enhancing your footage, it's dehancing the footage. So when it comes to film resolution, you can literally lower the resolution quality of your film. Now, I really don't like to do that too much. I think the film grain does enough speaking for it. So I like to have mine between like 80 and 90. I'm gonna go 85 on this one. Then you can mess with the shadows, midtones, and highlights. I don't really like to mess with this too much. I kind of leave it on the, what they give me. And just so we can kind of see this on and off, if we go into, you can really notice it when you zoom in a little bit, but this is what it looks like with it on. This is what it looks like with it off. Now, this obviously is super clean. This is what we're used to seeing in like DSLRs or, common digital film cameras today. But back in the day, to get that real grit, to get that real, that goodness, we're gonna go ahead and put that on. And now you have just a little bit more noise, a little bit more character, a little bit more film grain in there, which to me just adds a little bit more of that filmic look that I really wanted to go for in this particular scene. To me, that's looking pretty good. Let's back out of this. What's up, man?
I heard you stop talking.
Hello, little one. My new little pup has joined us. Okay, new little pup came in. We're gonna carry on just for a second because she's new and she's scared and she's lonely. Look at her. Now we go down to halation. I think that personally this could be overdone, and I've seen a lot of filmmakers overdo this, and it's a look, don't get me wrong, but I think that you should be careful not to overdo it, and you should be tasteful with it. Now, if we enable halation, right now, where you could really tell, and let me zoom into this really quick, where you could really tell the halation comes in is right here. If I enable it and take it off, that's what that looks like with it off. That's what it looks like with it on. What I like about this is that right now we have it super subtle, but we could actually go in here and customize it, which is really cool. It's not just like a plug and play. So if we go to, impact, let's put the impact up to 100 just for now, just so we can really dial it in. You can kind of start to see the effect of it. So this is what it looks like with the halation on, and this is what it looks like with it off. As you can see, it just gives a little bit more of this like reddish, warm glow to your footage. What's cool about what Dehancer has is that they have these presets for the halation. So if you don't want to get too granular with the customization, you could go right into, a 35mm halation, and you could just get that kind of preset that they already have in there. Personally, I kind of just went with the 35mm halation and kind of nailed exactly what I was going for. Now, something that's really cool is this bloom effect. If you guys have ever messed with a mist filter or a Black Pro mist filter, and you see those real bloomed out highlights on a lot of different filmmakers' footage, I've used them before. I like them, but the issue is that you can't really control them. So once you slap it on there, it's there, and it is what it is. With this, what's really cool about this is that you could really dial in a little bit more or a little bit less, and you can manipulate it to your liking rather than just having a mist filter on your footage and having to deal with that no matter what. So now, if you enable this, you could really start to tell the difference, and I'll go right into 100% here, and if you notice, like right around this region, you could really tell it starts to really pop this area right here, and it just kind of like blooms the highlights. Now, again, just like with the halation, you could choose to dial it in and go to custom settings, or you could just choose one of these 35mm, 65mm, or even 8mm. And if you notice, the 8mm is a lot stronger than the 65mm. If we go to 65mm, this is what it looks like. A lot more dialed down, which is something that I'm kind of going for, not something that's like overly done. If you go to 35mm, it's pretty much the same. I don't see that much of a difference. 16mm, you start to see more of a difference, and then 8mm to me is just like a little bit too much. For now, I'm just gonna go to 35mm, but you can go and customize these settings and really start to dive deep into dialing in exactly the kind of bloom that you want for your image. Again, I'm just gonna go to 65mm because to me that looked perfect. Now, you do have all of these other things that you could play with. You have film damage, which if I turn that on, it starts to kind of like damage the film. She wants to go play. She hears Bowie downstairs barking away, and she wants to go play with Bowie. But I got to keep her away from Bowie because Bowie's a little upset at her. She's a new pup, and you know, she's claiming her territory. But anyways, back to the tutorial. If you go down to film damage, you can really customize this and really like start to, you know, essentially damage your film. I definitely think that you can use this in a lot of different cases, and if I zoom in here, you can really start to tell. But if I go to dust amount, you can go here and you start to see like the little dust right here. You start to see the scale of it. You can really play with the scale. You can really mess with the size of it. And if I zoom back out to fit, you can really start to tell. Now, obviously that's terrible. It looks awful. But if you want to go to like an 8mm kind of look, if I hit play on this, you can start to really see that film grain and that film damage at work here. And don't get me wrong, it's cool. I think it's definitely usable. It could be a look, it could be a stylized kind of look that you're going for, but I want it to be a little bit more subtle. That's just my style. You could go from film damage to gate weave, overscan, which if you go to overscan, basically it gives you like these different film scans, which is really cool. You can go to Super 35. You can go to widescreen. You can go to Ultra Panavision, which looks like this. I'm going to leave it off. So far, I like where this is headed. And then obviously you have a vignette. And then you have monitor output LUT generator, where I believe you can go and, you know, export a specific LUT that you created with Dehancer. Now, really quickly, I want to show you guys what I would do to finalize this image using just some basic coloring using Premiere Pro. So I'm going to head over to Lumetri. I'm going to grab Lumetri and I'm going to throw Lumetri on this. And basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a mask. I'm going to create a mask. I'm going to bring it down here. And I'm basically going to create shadows in my image so that I create a point of interest right around here. So I'm going to take these shadows, I'm going to create this mask, and I'm going to create it all down here, and then I'm going to feather it. I'm going to go to feather, and then I'm going to go to basic correction, and all I'm going to do is just move down the exposure. And I'm going to move it down just about there, and I could even kind of mess with this, like put it right around here. And if you take it off, you don't really notice. Again, it's subtle, just like everything else that we're doing here. But if you take it on and off, you could tell a difference. Like boom, boom. Now, I don't really want to mess too much with this because I like that's bringing some texture, it's bringing some color, it's also bringing some exposure to the overall scene. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn it back on, but I'm also going to move the mask down just a little bit. So it only touches around this area. I'm also going to have it kind of come down around here, but I'm going to have it fan out a little bit higher, like this. So it doesn't really affect the light on the mirror too much. It's kind of just around this area, and it's giving you a nice vignette around here. So still your point of interest is going to be around here. By the way, her name is Daisy, and she wants to get up and she wants to play. I have to hurry up and finish this tutorial because I gotta play with this new pup. The reason why I think masks are so important is because it's really what gives you that extra little edge when you are color grading, especially when you're trying to create points of interest. And that's the way I think of it, is that like when you look at an image and you're color grading, it's not just about, you know, adding contrast and saturation, it's also about telling a story. And I think that when I look at this scene, I want to make sure the viewer is looking right here and they feel like this is where they should be looking. This is the point of interest. This is the intrigue here. And you do that by creating these different shadows. Now, I'm also going to create a little bit of a shadow on top, and I'm going to create another little mask right up top here, and I'm just going to create it right here. I'm not going to go off over here too much, just right here, so you feel like this is the point of interest. Again, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to go ahead and feather this out. The reason why you feather a mask is because it makes it a lot less like a line and a lot more like a gradient, and it just blends into the image a lot better. So I'm going to go ahead and darken this a little bit by just lowering the exposure. I'm going to lower the exposure by about that much, and that's the way it looks with it on. And you guys can see the difference between taking these off and then putting them back on. And to me, it just gives it, again, just a focal point of interest. And that's pretty much how I would color grade this using Dehancer. Now give me a second because I gotta put this little one down for a second so I can show you guys how to color grade this now using nothing but your regular editing and color grading tools that you have in your workstation. So quickly starting from scratch, the first thing that I would do is I would go down to creative, go ahead and grab my Rec 709 conversion LUT. Okay, so now this is what it looks like with the LUT turned on. And for those of you who don't know, Rec 709 is just the color space that we work in on something like a commercial or a TV show. So now that this is converted from log to Rec 709, the first thing that I'm going to do is just mess with my exposure. So I'm going to go ahead and dial in the shadows, the blacks. I'm going to bring the blacks down. I don't want it to be too overbearing with the blacks. Put the whites up just a little bit, the highlights up just a little bit. Put up the contrast. Let's drop these shadows. And that to me is starting to look pretty good. Now we're going to go into our curves and we're just going to do a gentle S curve. I don't like to go too crazy with the curves because you could easily overdo it and make this look terrible. So when I think of curves, I think of just gentle adjustments. So I'm going to go up right here in like the mid-tone area just to bring that up a little bit. I'm going to bring this down a little bit to get it a little bit more contrast. And then I'm going to bring the bottom of this up just so we're not hitting 0 on the blacks. Like I said before, in Dehancer, you have film compression, which kind of like rolls that off gently, and there's nothing that'll touch black or pure white. Same thing with curves. I think that if you bring up the blacks just a little bit, so nothing hits 0, and then you bring down the whites on the curves, I think that kind of gives it that, you know, that film look. Now, the next thing that I'm going to do here is I'm going to go to color wheels, and I'm going to start to really dial in like a look for this grade. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to take the highlights, I'm going to push it a little bit more towards yellow green. And then I'm going to take the shadows and I'm going to put it in the opposite direction of like a bluish teal. Now, that is pretty much how I would grade this. And of course, you know, we could go back here and we could copy and paste the little shadow vignettes that I created. No reason to redo those. And this is how this image looks. Now, again, like I could really go in there and start to dial it in and try to get it a little bit closer to what I want. But you guys can kind of see a difference here. If you go from this to this, you know, what we did with Dehancer just has a little bit more of a filmic quality, and I think gives it that kind of grittiness that I really like. I don't think that Dehancer is something that could be used or should be used for every single project that you guys work on. I think that it's very particular in the sense that, like, if you're going for that film look, you throw this on there, you start tweaking it, and you can get something that is a little bit closer, that emulates film. Again, guys, I'm not trying to sell you this product. I don't think that you absolutely need this to grade your footage. I just think it's a pretty cool tool that can help you guys in your journey of filmmaking. And if you guys want that, I think that this is probably one of the best things to get if you're trying to achieve that. So this is how I graded this car scene. And if you guys want to see a full lighting breakdown of exactly how I shot this, how I composed the shots, and how I went through this entire scene, you guys can check out this link right here. And if you guys have any questions on how I color graded this or how you guys should color grade your next project, drop them in the comments down below, and I promise you I will get to them as soon as I can. I'll see you guys next week. Deuces.